send them to your to Kelly, right?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, cool. So just as a reminder, this is being recorded, and we're going to ask you some questions about COVID-19 and the impacts on the university and just your general outlook. If there are any questions that I ask that you don't want to answer, that's totally okay, and we can move on.
Okay.
So first, can you tell me your name and spell it for me?
It's James Schmidt, SCHMIDT.
Okay, and what's today's date and time?
Appears to be 11th of May at 2:04 in the afternoon.
Okay, so when you first learned about COVID-19, what were your thoughts about it, and how have they changed since then?
Well, it seemed as though something off in the distance, right? We heard a little bit about it in January from various news sources. I think I paid attention to it more than most people because in my work as chancellor, we have a number of Chinese partnerships. And so I was one who immediately went to the map to see where Wuhan was located in comparison to where we have partnerships. I was first of all concerned about friends that I've made over the last several years. I also had been to China in the fall. So I was over in China in early November. And I was thinking, wow, I wonder how close I was to the Wuhan district. And turns out I actually wasn't that far away.
Oh my God.
So that got my attention. I would also say it was a little bit later. I think it was more into February when it was more on our radar. But there was a story of it was a building that they'd been using, I believe, it was a former hotel that they'd used to house quarantine people who were sick in Xiamen, China. And we have an actual, I mean, that's one of the communities I have visited twice. I had been there in November, and we reached out to make sure that there weren't any of the university friends that we had met and relationships we built, if any of those people have been affected. And Xiamen is a little bit smaller city by comparison to a lot of Chinese cities. I think it only has 4 million people in it. And but it feels, and because it's on the ocean, it's just a beautiful city, and it's got a smaller scale than, say, Shanghai, which is just, like New York City. And so in many ways, it made it hit a little bit closer to home. So I remember having conversations with our executive team. Our Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration, John Haven, had been plugged into the network. And I remember him saying, just want you to know, we're tracking this virus, and we're making preparations for the university should it come here. In part because we have so many Chinese friendships and partnerships, and there's just, more and more people are traveling more widely. And so you never know when a virus is going to come onto our campus.
Yeah. Okay, so what issues have most concerned you about the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's an easy one. It's the health and safety of our faculty, staff, and students. Universities intentionally are meant to bring people together. It is supposed to have a higher level of density, and I talk about this when I'm greeting incoming first-year students. The collisions, the natural collisions, you never know who you're going to bump into on your campus, and it's kind of part of my shtick, where I say you might have bumped into, get your head out of your phone, watch where you're walking, because you might bump into a future business partner, a best friend, a future best man or maid of honor, husband, wife. It could be, or lifelong friend. You just never know who you're going to bump into. And if you're not looking up, you'll miss out. And so it's really by design that universities are supposed to create those collisions. People were talking about dormitories as being really the cruise ship of things on land, because we have people in tight housing situations. So those are some of my initial concerns as to how do we make sure we keep faculty and staff safe and students safe. Some of the early things that we'd heard is that there were, almost no cases in Wisconsin, and I think even when the first couple cases happened, they were in Milwaukee. and is heavily focused in the Bay Area of California and in Washington State, and it was just starting to get into New York. And that's when some of those, like NYU closed. Again, you think about those are really international institutions, and just because of the type of institutions, you got a lot of people traveling in these big cities. So that's, those are some of the early thoughts and concerns.
Sure.
So how do we keep people safe? So I originally thought, I don't think we'll have to close, but that was when things started to roll downhill really quickly. We were doing our best to try to make the best decisions. Universities, are focused on knowledge. So we were supposed to be critical thinkers, people who rely on data, and experts. So you think about the decision making. So logically, those are the things we should be doing. Where a piece of this was emotional as well, emotional well-being. People are afraid. I remember thinking on a Monday that we weren't going to be closing, and by Friday we'd announced that we closed. I tried to send up an updated message, and from the time I sent that message on Tuesday or Wednesday, I almost was prepared to send out a never mind email saying, things have changed again. And you know what? It's interesting, although things have been much the same in the last week, but all throughout this, things are just moving so quickly. 1 minute we shouldn't wear masks, and now we're saying almost everybody should wear masks. So, that's been, I think this generation will, this will be our moment. Everyone will remember this spring and what that brought. I think it'll, it's a little bit different than, when JFK was shot, or Martin Luther King Jr. or Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. I remember the Challenger explosion. I was sitting, as it turns out, I was a college student. I was a student leader, and I was sitting in a Minnesota State University board meeting, similar to our Board of Regents. And the announcement was made by the board chair. I remember where I was sitting. I remember who I was sitting next to. For 9/11, I remember where I was when I first heard of that, 8:15 in the morning that happened. This one is actually bigger than that. Although it didn't happen as an explosion, it really, the ramification of the explosion has continued to have shockwaves and impact. And we don't know where it's going to end. I remember when we first made the announcement to close school, we were then going to come back, and I think it was 5 weeks. And we barely got into the following week, and I realized, that so much had changed. I don't think we're going to be able to come back for that either. So this has completely changed the way almost everything works or doesn't work. And I'm a little off topic, but I've gotten more reflective as it's gone on, tried to find the silver lining in all of this, as we're, our dog is happy that everybody's home, that my son came back from college, and the one in high school is home all the time. And it's made people connect on a different level. So there, with all the tragedy, there are things that it's made us become, I think, more introspective and reflective.
Yeah. So was there any sort of plan in place to deal with something of this nature in the university?
So we do what were called tabletop exercises. And most of our executive team has gone through what's called NIMS training. So National Incident Management System. So setting up a command structure and making sure, but those are really set up for different things. That's set up for, something that's shorter term, whether it be a fire, a shooter, any of those other kinds of things that would come up. This is really uncharted. So we've had to develop many of these systems. And of course, if this were to happen again, we're making sure that we're keeping track of what has worked well and what hasn't worked well. I applaud this effort to have this oral research study done, oral history, because again, who knows, one day this might be of use to a chancellor or other people 20, 30 years from now. Hopefully it's quite a ways down the line.
Yeah. For example, the archives, we currently have a collection based on the 1919 Spanish flu pandemic. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting to look at the parallels that they were having compared to us. So I do.
I would
also
love to
think
hear,
that-
I'd love to hear more about that at some point.
Yeah, we can
Maybe
definitely.
mention it to Greg if he's.
Yeah, we'll send
Yeah.
you a link.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me look at my questions and find where I am.
You've got a lot of questions and I talk longer than most of your guests, so
That's totally
hopefully
fine.
you can bypass some of your questions. And
Yeah. Was there any sort of plan? So can you walk me through what you had to do in announcing and planning for this? So right when you found out about that the university was going to have to close, what has it looked like? Does that make sense?
Sure does. So we have an emergency management team that is predetermined. And so those are all we set up, and we do what we call these tabletop exercises. So that's, I don't really know how many people, it's, 30 people. And, but as we were pulling that together, I said, no, wait a second, given this one, I want to make sure we had the health services director in it, bring a doctor into the meeting.
Yeah.
I brought in shared governance because I've always been a believer of including them anytime there are big decisions to make. So the entire group, I think, is probably 55 to 60 people. And we convened immediately after getting the briefing from County Public Health and the epidemiologist from Mayo Clinic. And I don't know if you recall, but we had a streamed on kind of open town meeting where people could come in and ask questions, and we got the facts. So immediately after that concluded, I had set up a meeting with the emergency management team because I wanted to then process what we heard, take a look at the best information we had moving forward, and to make decisions after that. It's a big group, and I would typically let something percolate up. My style is we're smarter together than we are by ourselves. So let's get everyone's thinking. But given the urgency of this one, I came in and I'd been thinking about it, and I said, what do you think we should do? So I said, I want you to be thinking about it. And normally I just let that sit and let people slowly percolate. And I said, what do you think we should do? Let me put something on the table. Here's what I think we should do. And that's where I specifically said I thought we needed to be closed for 3 weeks. Most of the schools are being closed for 2 weeks, but I wanted to give our faculty more time to effectively get the curriculum online. You asked me earlier what was my biggest concern: health and safety, followed by making sure students got the educational opportunity that they signed up for. And while I knew that the semester wasn't going to end the way any of us wanted it to, I wanted to make sure that the students who had invested their time and money had the opportunity to complete that, and so that it didn't unnecessarily disadvantage them. So I wanted to give our faculty a lot of time to try to get their meeting materials. I would tell you, based on emails and messages I received from students, all of them show a great deal of gratitude and believe that their faculty members have worked really hard to make sure that's gone well. And almost the next breath they say, and we can't wait to be back together on campus. And so we appreciate the effort, but all this has done is reaffirm that, yeah, I really don't want to do education online. I want to, because again, you want to have those collisions. Teaching isn't just dissemination of information. It's context. It's the ability to shape your own thinking. Building those critical thinking skills can only happen if you have an idea to sharpen your ideas on the hard edge of somebody who disagrees with you. And so that's, you can do some of that online, but it's not the same.
That was really well spoken. So were you in contact with any other universities in the UW system?
Yes.
In discussing what would have to be done? And with that, was the decision that you made Eau Claire based, or was it handed down from the system?
So that's a great question. So we'd been in communication. We were having some regular chancellor phone calls to the UW system president, across would get all of the chancellors on a conference call. Interestingly enough, I was making some visits in Florida. We have a lot of alums down there who have been generous to the university. And I would typically spend 2, 3, 4 days down there in late winter, early spring to see if they would like to continue to support us. And I'd had a little gathering down there, and I was sitting in the Fort Myers airport when it was maybe the second, it may have been even the first phone call like that. And that's when we first started talking about whether we'd do some travel bans. We talked about whether or not it was safe for people to do that. And I remember asking on the phone, I said, should I quarantine myself if I'm coming in? No, we didn't think that was it. And nobody at that time thought we'd be canceling school for the rest of the semester. I think it may have been only a week or two later. I'd have to pull up the date from when that happened. Interestingly enough, I'd had additional plans to meet with some benefactors in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I remember our foundation director, President Kim Wei, asked me, should we cancel that trip? I'm like, no, this doesn't seem to be this issue. And as long as I can be in contact with the campus and I can monitor everything, I think it'll be okay. Well, a day later, it's like, oh, of course, like we can't go there. That's now become a hot spot, and it wasn't at the time. So things moved so fast, it was almost dizzying. And it was interesting because the airports were still busy when I flew back from Fort Myers, but it was days later, the head count at the airports went way down. So it's hard to believe. I remember the time where I really thought it was going to be time to shut down the campus. We were in Madison in the Rotunda for research in the Rotunda. And I thought about not going. And I'm like, well, no, I've got a phone call. I can be in touch with everybody. And our students worked so hard to get their posters selected, to have the governor come by, lieutenant governor, legislators come by. And it's really a celebration of the students' hard work. And that was one of the first times they really started to say the social distancing, even though we were still doing it. We were doing the elbow bumps and there was hand sanitizer, but that's just such a cramped area. It was impossible to be distanced. And I think it was either a Wednesday, and I think the Wednesday or Thursday, and we shut down a day later or a day and a half later. So it just moves so fast. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on it. It's just that early part of it. It was dizzying, the speed at which things were happening.
Yeah, it really was super fast. So what has the transition to online schooling looked like?
So it's meant a great deal. Faculty members gave up whatever their plans were for spring break. We're fortunate. We've got the CEDL group, which is based in Vicki Lord Larson Hall. Their whole emphasis is helping to improve teaching effectiveness. And they've helped, they're the ones that help faculty now move classes online. And so they had all hands on deck. They wanted to make sure faculty knew all the resources, the technology available. And it's got the job done. And in some ways, some really pleasant surprises have happened. I've heard from some well-respected faculty members who said, I had planned to retire, not this year, but I had planned to be a retiree and have as a point of pride that I'd never taught an online class, because they really wanted to avoid it. And a few of them have admitted to me, they said, I still want to be, and this one professor is in the sciences and is a bit of a lab rat. And he said, it's still better in person. I still need to do these labs in person. But I did find some things that actually work better online than even in person. So I think it's been one of those where the world gets turned upside down. We do things that we would have otherwise never considered doing. And there's always an opportunity for reflection, for learning. What is the advantage of this? I mean, I think if you were to say that people would be given 3 days notice, not even, and generally the campus is going to be shut down, and you're going to work from home, you're thinking, how could that possibly happen? How could that be efficient or effective? And there are some parts of this new world that are more effective, and some parts of it are less effective. I find that meetings tend to start and end on time more because it's always attached to a video conference. And while that shouldn't matter, what I notice people doing is say, oh, I'm sorry, I have to jump off this meeting. I've got another one. And they click, 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 and they're in their new meeting. Where the other one, they might, it just drags on a little bit longer to get done. I would tell you, I think I get at least twice as many emails as I did before, which is hard to believe. And it's because we no longer have these hallway meetings. We don't have these brief exchanges where, I duck my head out of my office to ask somebody or walk down the hall and have a quick conversation. So there's some things that work better and some things that don't work better. I have to tell you, generally, although I think this is a reasonable tool, and I think we will do more of these kinds of meetings, at least for me in the future, with Madison, as opposed to me getting in a car for 3 hours each direction. So I think there'll be more of that. But it's interesting, I came back a couple Thursdays ago, and it was after, I think, my second university-wide video campus meeting on a Thursday. And I got home, my wife asked me, how was your day? I said, I'm tired. And I just said I had back-to-back video meetings. I said, I don't know what it is. They said, the problem is I'm not moving. If I didn't get my workout in the morning, I would be, I don't know what I'd be, but I'd be in tough shape. And it seemed like the next day I noticed like 4 or 5 stories. And it was an interesting observation premise is that when we're meeting with people, all of our senses are operating. It's not just hearing and seeing, it's noticing subtleties in body language and other things. And your brain is used to that because I can see you. But if you were sitting in my family room with me, my brain would be picking up other signals. And the way I liken it, I don't think they did, it's like a cell phone looking for a cell tower. It's just always spinning. And they'll say if you're in a no cell tower area, you should turn that off on your phone so you don't drain the battery. Because your brain is trying to fill in the gaps by looking for other clues. So secondly, it wears your brain out. And then on top of it, they never do get all of those other subtle feedback. So it's made me think differently about how this tool can be useful and yet understand that there's no replacement for it. One of your questions eventually is going to talk about some of the impact of the institution. And right now I'm spending a lot of time with other colleagues and shared governance leaders talking about budget forecasts and what it means financially for the institution. And those are some of the hardest conversations to have. And it is so frustrating not to be in the same room, get around the table, look at a piece of paper, and really work through it. I threatened to reserve the Ojibwe ballroom because there's nothing going on in there, and have like 10 of us in a room spread out like 30 feet from each other with microphones. And I still might end up doing that at some point. I haven't, because again, I have a concern for, you just never know who might have been in contact, and it's just for everyone's safety that we don't do that.
So since you did mention the outlook, let's move on to 2 questions with that. With the first being, what's the monetary impact of this on the university?
Well, so far it's well over $10 million impact already. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I didn't raise that much in Florida when I was down there. So it's just a lot of money. The biggest hit was more than $5 million in residence hall refunds.
Yeah.
And I think it was 1.7 million in dining fees. There was a number of costs to getting things up online. We ranked 11th in the country for the number of our students that spend at least a semester abroad. And that's a highlight of an education for any Blue Gold, something we promote. So that means we have a lot of students living abroad, particularly in spring semester, which is a heavier semester. And we said, you got to come home. And so I think it was $71,000 in airline tickets that the university had to buy emergency tickets to get people home. It's expensive. You know, we covered the cost. Wasn't the students' fault, and we covered that. And, you know, it was the right thing to do to refund, you know, residence hall fees and dining fees as well. A lot of schools tried to be really cheap about that, and they weren't doing much. And then, you know, I have a son at another school, and he's a freshman, and they were going to give everybody like $1,000 and call it good. Well, in part because he didn't sign up for housing in time, he was in an apartment, and you pay more for that, and they weren't going to differentiate that. From the school's perspective, our costs are all the same. I mean, we save a little bit of money not cleaning as many bathrooms, but we still have the staff. We have debt payment on the dormitories that we have, so we owe banks, you know, if it will, those dollars. So we refund those dollars, but we really don't save much money at all. In fact, we increase cleaning for those students who remain there. So, you know, the impact there was $10 million. Since then, we've had the state of Wisconsin has said, gee, you know, a lot of people aren't working and tax collections are down. So we want 5% of the money we gave you for this year, we want that back. So that was about $2.5 million. And so I had to contact everybody at the university and said, you got to get this money back to me, and you got a couple of weeks. And, you know, when you get to the end of the school year, most of their budgets have been spent. And so coming up with those dollars has been hard. Most people are projecting that we're likely to get a state budget cut next year, even though we're in the current biennium. I don't know how big the cut will be, but it's really likely. And then by the time we get to February of next year, they're going to be working on the next 2-year budget, and the forecasts are likely to be worse there. So we're trying to brace for that. And then there's a lot of uncertainty around enrollment. The Midwest is already challenged with having fewer high school graduates. I've spent a lot of energy with our university over the last, well, since I've been here almost 7 years, making sure that we manage our enrollment effectively. I've never been a person that's wanted to get to be this big school. Be what you are, be really good at it. Frankly, there are other schools in the system that when there are a lot of students, they ran the enrollment up. For right or wrong, our leadership, going back to the early 70s, the school, chancellors, deans, provosts, faculty said, we're going to be about this size. So we've really been about our size for more than 40 years. And, but it's becoming more challenging to remain that size. Other schools go up and down. We've been really stable. So frankly, we're planning, we have a number of scenarios. We're in the middle of trying to identify another $10 million in savings before we go into the fall. And other scenarios show us needing to put aside $30 million. So it's just really an uncertain time. So in the past, when we, 2015, we had an enormous budget cut. It was $300 million was the proposal from the governor at that time for the system. In the end, it became $250. But we knew what that target was. We knew it in January, and we had till July when the bill was passed to know for sure. But the uncertainty with this one are all of these different variables. And so that makes it tougher. There are some higher ed researchers that are saying they should plan for 20% fewer students on campus. That's a big number. And on the other hand, they're saying we might actually have an opportunity, because for students that had planned to maybe go to Berkeley or NYU or Colorado, that because of this, families may say, you know what, we'd like to have Johnny or Sally stay a little closer to home because we're just a little afraid. And someone said, you go to New York to be a part of New York, but they said if we're going to be quarantined, what good is it to be spending a gajillion dollars to live in a shoebox only to stay in the shoebox and never get to go and enjoy the city? And there are other people who maybe decided to go to expensive private institutions, and because in the uncertainty of the virus say, you know what, a less expensive opportunity of high quality close to home could be good. So, we're working really hard to try, the best case scenario is we wouldn't lose any enrollment. So we'll see. We're trying to be hopeful, but also do some strategic planning and try to protect the institution from big shifts in the budget. It's when you have to make big changes quickly, you don't make as good a decision. So we're doing all this planning now, and the closer we get to fall, the better data we get. And again, we try to make our decisions based on the best data. I believe that, well, first of all, we will be open in the fall. I believe that we will be back on campus, and depending on the circumstance will depend on how that looks. There have been conversations in academic affairs with deans, department chairs about how do we limit class sizes? How do we still teach some of the bigger classes but into smaller discussion groups? How do we try to make sure you got social distancing? And frankly, almost all of these plans call for a lot of testing. And I will tell you that the UW system is working on some things. And frankly, we've got some alumni who live in the technology world who've done very well for themselves and are well connected. They've brought some ideas that where UW-Eau Claire could be on the forefront of some really exciting different ways of doing testing. I mean, you might actually have international news cameras on this campus wanting to follow this study and these tests that we're thinking about. So I can't say much more than that, although it's really cool if it's cool what our Blue Golds have done. And I think you may have seen the article that the early COVID test that Mayo Clinic developed, the team that developed it was headed up by a Blue Gold.
Oh, I got like chills.
Yeah, you
That's cool.
look it up. You could look it up at our website, and she's a remarkable young woman. I think she's originally from Bemidji, Minnesota, a little town, and she headed the team that developed the test. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's really
I
cool.
lost the question and all that.
That's okay. You answered it. So just a quick question. Do you know about how many students are left on campus right now within the dorms?
I get regular updates. I think we're down, it's under 100 now.
Okay.
I want to say it's in the 60 to 70 range.
Oh, wow.
Frankly, we had some problems. Some of our international students couldn't get flights home, and that was a real stressor for them. And so I don't have all of the story, but I get regular updates on that at least weekly. It's part of a comprehensive, it's part of that emergency management team. So there's a number of reports that I get frequently and keeps me informed of what's going on.
Oh, that's awesome. So how has this impacted, from your point of view, how has this impacted students, staff, and faculty?
Well, it affects us differently. Many of our faculty, staff, and students have family members with underlying health issues. And some people are truly terrified that they will either get sick or their engagement could have a loved one be sick. I think that there are some, we reflect society. Some are pretty cavalier. They think they're invincible. I'd heard stories of, some of the students remained in the community in the Randall Park area, not respecting the social distancing. And, young people often think they're invincible. And while it appears to affect older people at higher rates, the research is showing there's a lot of young people who have not survived this. So I think it's important that we do that. I think, and then there's been a lot of people who've lost their jobs. So there are parents who've lost jobs. A lot of college students have lost jobs because they work in the service industry or in an industry that's dependent on the service industry. And I think they've said 1 out of 5 internships for the summer have been canceled. And I know there have been a lot of Blue Golds have lost their internships. Interesting, the summer enrollment's up a little bit. And again, I think it's because a lot of students maybe don't have as plans to work as much as they thought and maybe lost an internship. So I think it's smart to take some classes to try to make sure that they can still graduate in 4 years, or maybe even get out a little sooner so they can save themselves some debt and some time on that front. One of your questions, and it hit it home for me, is that someone I know was lost their life from COVID-19, and she was an alum of the university. She received a Distinguished Alumni Award from the university. I believe it was at the May 2008 commencement. She was a refugee from Vietnam who found her way to Eau Claire, came here with nothing. Was a brilliant math mind, and originally studied actuarial sciences within the math department. And she went on and was very successful in insurance-related industries. And but she's dedicated the last decade of her life in the arts, working with populations in New York City that, underprivileged people who wouldn't otherwise have access to the arts. So I got to know her and her family. I mean, I'm talking about her whole family. She received an award from the Joyce Foundation a year ago, May. And I get invited to things all the time, and I usually can't go. And it was in New York City, and I was just so honored that she included me. I got my tux out, which I have for the Viennese ball. I'm sorry to have missed that. And I went to be a part of this event, and she had her whole extended family there. There were two people being honored at this award ceremony. A.T. Wynne, which was the name of the alum, and the Prime Minister of Australia.
Wow.
Who was there. And it was just the two of them. And we got to see the premiere of a new ballet that was done by the Australian ballet that came. And this woman was a dancer, among other things. She was only 61 and in really good health. And she was, to be a dancer, you have to be really fit. And I got the notice from her husband, and I am still in shock. She was so full of life and such a giving person. And, now I see, the toll is, over 80,000 people. And I think that before this is done, most of us will know somebody who we were close to who died. Yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah. So as of now, what do you see as the future outlook of the university? Specifically, do you think this will have a lasting impact? And if so, what do you think it'll be?
So I think it does have a lasting impact. And there's some positive things. Let me start with that. Sure. And that I think is it's pushed us out of our comfort zone. I think it's proved that we can be resilient, that unfortunately, if some other crisis comes up in the future, I have great confidence in this university and our ability to respond effectively to it. First of all, it needs to be based on principles. You make decisions based on principles. And anytime there's a hard decision, I'll have my executive team or whoever shared governance will step back and say, what are the principles that are important to consider here? And if you start with that, you'll make the right decisions. That's your true north. That's your North Star. That's when you know you've got a compass to lead you through the tough times. And that one's easy, right? It's the health, safety of everybody who's part of the campus. Second one was, how do we ensure students still have educational opportunity and we don't disadvantage them? And if you do those two things, the decision to close school actually, which seemed like it would be a hard decision, was actually pretty easy. I will tell you that one of the things that I continue to be amazed in is if you trust people, you just trust people. So I bring, anytime I've got the toughest cuts that we made back in 2015, we eliminated 179 full-time positions. So when we set up a 2-day meeting, we've done rapid action task force. So I asked the campus for their best thinking on all of these areas of the university. And lots of open forums. We took feedback, but in the end, I brought the administration into a room, and then the student leadership, the leadership of the University Staff Council, of the academic staff and the faculty. And we all came together and we ground through it together. It wasn't, gee, administration came up with a proposal and then we gave it to shared governance to bless. We did it together. And I think it was really eye-opening for shared governance to realize how many disagreements there are between administrators. This stuff wasn't easy, but I think by doing it that way, by putting people at the table and helping them understand, be transparent, provide them good data, and be principle-based, that you will make good decisions. I have to tell you, when we made the decision that we were going to close school, I made everybody stick together. I said, what are the issues now that we've made the decision? What are the issues now that we need to make? What decisions do we need to make so we can notify the faculty and staff and students, because there's going to be 1,000 questions. So here we had 55, 60 people in the council oak room. And, well, we need to think about this, we need to think about that. And people went around the room, said, who wants to work on that? And people raised their hands and we scattered. And then we came back a couple hours later, we got reports and we found out where it is. So here, all of, you know, there's no way I could have come up with all those answers. But people felt a part of it and they put their best thinking together. I find that when crisis happens, people rise to the occasion. And so I tell people, when you sit in a room with me and we're going to make decisions for the university, I want you to bring your perspective as a faculty member. I want you to bring your perspective as a member of the maintenance crew, or whatever your job is. But I want you to have the perspective of what's right for the university and how do we meet our mission? How do we serve our students? And if you do that, it's amazing. People come together. So that's the positive impact. It reminds us that we can do this. It does say we can do anything together. The negatives are really around some of the financial implications of this. Last week at the Board of Regents meeting, President Cross announced a number of proposals. And he said that it was really in response to COVID-19. A lot of the universities were in terrible financial shape before this happened. UW-Eau Claire was actually in good financial conditions, in part because how we made decisions in 2015. We were very careful not to overextend ourselves, overextend our budget. So we put some money aside for a rainy day. We just had no idea that we were going to have a biblical flooding rain come down on us. But we had that cushion, you know, we're okay. We're not in dire straits. We were able to effectively manage more than $10 million hit we took overnight, but now we're trying to replenish those reserve accounts so that we can face whatever we get in the fall. By working together, we're able to be prepared. The potential, though, is if we do end up with a big enrollment hit in the fall, and if there's an unreasonably high cut by state government, I think that some schools in the upper Midwest won't make it. And I think we will make it. I have great confidence in it because of how we do our work together, because we do trust one another, because we are transparent. And I see incredible resolve for people to come together. I'm hoping and praying that everyone, all the faculty, staff, and students stay safe. Oh, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Oh,
I had something.
I had a thing step up that said my speaker isn't working. That's why.
Oh, yep. All good.
So, you know, that would be the worst if that ends up happening. And I haven't heard of anybody yet. We've been fortunate.
Okay. I think you've covered pretty much all of the bases.
Okay.
Is there anything else that we didn't discuss that you, or any lasting words you want to say?
I guess if I'm I work from home for part of the time, and then I work from campus, and I do a little both. It is still hard for me to walk onto campus in spring when it's so beautiful and see the campus so empty. That isn't how things are meant to be.
Mm.
Um, I think it is that sense of reflection. Um, I almost never bump into anybody on campus, so I have more time to notice the bald eagles that are flying overhead. I am a little more introspective in other things I observe. It's there's a few silver linings in there. I have to tell you, some of my biggest sadness are all the year-end activities that we've missed together.
Yeah.
My wife and I would go to both nights of Viennese Ball every year. I go to both nights of Jazz Festival. This was really the season of celebration. All of April, I mean, I tell my family I'm going to be gone basically every night in April because it's when we celebrate. And
Yeah.
when we go through May, I'm going to miss commencement. And we've promised to still do a live commencement. We're thinking about homecoming. So we're thinking maybe Friday afternoon of homecoming be a way to invite back the class of 2020. So I'm hoping we're able to do that. I'm hoping that this virus will cure it, solve it, test for it to make people more secure. If it's a long-term new normal, then that's going to force us to continue to evolve. I will tell you, faculty are already making plans, not to necessarily be online, but to make sure that we can still have all those high impact experiences that we're known for and that students have that. That idea of excellence is worth fighting for. And I am inspired every day by the value that our shared governance groups, students, faculty, staff, come together in their can-do attitude for this place. And frankly, it's the students that do that for us. And, I'd do just about anything to protect this place. I get a little choked up by how proud I am of the place. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you for this interview. And again, thank you for taking time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedule. I will send you a link to the informed consent sheets.
Okay.
And I will also send you a link to the COVID-19 online archive that we're working with for the university, along with the National Archive, where this will also eventually be featured. Okay?
Yeah, will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All
And
right.
I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. You too. Take care. Bye.